2 Samuel chapter number 11 this evening. 2 Samuel chapter 11. This might be the saddest chapter in both 1 and 2 Samuel. Even more sad than some of the chapters that we've seen, the atrocities of King Saul. Saul, we knew, was on his way to becoming a villain early on in his reign, but now we're going to see the lowest point of David's reign, and it's disappointing. It's the gut feeling that we get whenever we hear in the news or in social media when a respected leader in the Christian circle, whether it's a pastor or somebody like that. A couple weeks ago, news broke about Philip Yancey, was a Christian author, wrote a number of books, and he stepped down from publishing and doing all these things and admitted to having an affair for the last 8 years. And anytime you hear something like that, it's gut-wrenching. It's horrible. And that's what we witness in the life of David tonight. But it's not something we want to skip over because it's there for a warning for us. It's there to allow us to feel that emotion, to feel that turning in our gut, and keep us on guard against falling into that place ourselves, because each and every one of us are capable of falling, even as the good King David, the king after God's own heart. And that's what we're going to look at a little bit here in 2 Samuel, chapter number 11. We've been in a section of the book that's described David's great rise and success as king, and it's been wonderful to see the way that God used David and worked through him and established a covenant with him. He wanted to build a temple, a house for God, and God said, no, I'm going to build a house for you first. I'm going to establish your dynasty, then your son can build me a house. And God gave David great renown and riches and victory everywhere he turned. And it's been a wonderful season in the kingdom, now the United Kingdom with strong and good leadership, but that's about to change. And we're entering into a section. This chapter marks the beginning of a section of just really messes in David's life, in his leadership, and in the kingdom. And it begins here with a major mistake that David makes. Well, really, I guess we could say a series of mistakes. Falling to lust, and then worrying so much about his reputation that he fails to be the shepherd of Israel and God's people, and ends up being an enemy, in a sense, of God's people, and sentencing innocent men, not just Uriah, as we'll see tonight, but other innocent men to their death, all to protect his own reputation. And it's a really, really dark time, a horrible series of mistakes. And the narrator here of the story is going to make it clear to us at the end of the chapter that David displeased the Lord. And that may be the saddest part of it all. The fact that the king after God's own heart now has done things that were unpleasing in the sight of the God who was so gracious to establish an everlasting covenant with him. So let's jump into it tonight here. We'll get the big idea. The title of this chapter, what I've just titled this chapter, this section, is The Good King Falls. Here's the big idea, and then we'll jump into reading and understanding the narrative. Big idea of this passage: power, success, and affluence have great potential to corrupt. And when they do, God is not pleased. When we come to a season of our life that we have power, that we have affluence, that we have success, and we get comfortable, there's great potential that comfortability and all those things can bring us to a place of corruption, to a place of abuse of power, to a place that we feel we don't need God, to a place that we take things that we normally should not have taken because we're not too concerned about living a life that pleases God anymore, because we already have the success we feel that we need. We already feel we have God's favor. And those things, when we come to that place in life, and by the way, every American pretty much in our country, with the affluence that we enjoy in the 21st century, we're capable of this. We're capable of the corruption that it might bring through the comfortability. Don't have much of a context to set tonight, but let's go ahead and jump in. Verse number 1, understanding the narrative here, 2 Samuel chapter 11. And it came to pass, after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David tarried still at Jerusalem. Now, the narrator establishes a time frame for us in relation to the previous conflict with the Ammonites and the Arameans, or the Syrians. A year after David had defeated both the Syrians and the Ammonites that came against him, when he simply wanted to show kindness to the king of the Ammonites because his father Nahash had passed away, he had victory. Now, a year after that, they go out to fight against and war against the Ammonites. When we understand the phrase, when kings go forth to battle, I want to read you something that I came across. David's timing for this military campaign was important for two reasons. First, by picking the anniversary date of the humiliation of the Israelite envoy sent to convey condolences to Nahash's death, David left no doubt about the reason for this attack on Rabbah. Second, late spring was the ideal time to conduct foreign military campaigns because of improved weather conditions and the fact that armies could be fed from the wheat and barley ripening in the Ammonite fields. And that's the idea when it says the time came when kings go forth to war. It was the opportune time, weather-wise, to be able to cross the hard terrain in that region of the country, to get an army across that terrain and be able to allow that army to have the right conditions to survive and be able to find and forage food while they were doing their tasks. This would be the normal time that kings would go forth if they were going to plan battles. It was just practical. You had a better chance for your army winning and lasting longer, especially if you're going to lay siege against the city. They're waging war here, the Bible tells us, against the kingdom of Ammon, and they had already gained victories against the Ammonites, most likely the border cities, and different defenses that they had set up around the capital of Rabbah, and now they are besieging the capital of Rabbah. Here's a map that just kind of shows us Ammon across the river there, and Rabbah being the capital city. I'll mention here later on the distance between Jerusalem and Rabbah and how that becomes relevant to us. But they're besieging the city. Now, I want us to understand something for a second here and maybe correct some things we might have heard in applications from this passage that, quite frankly, are a little bit errant. Laying siege at this time in the world, for an army to lay siege against a city, it could take weeks, it could take months, it could even take years to lay siege to a city. Sometimes in movies, fantasy movies, medieval times, things like that, you might see an army lay siege to a city with big walls, and they have great big machines of war and battering rams. Yes, sometimes that would happen, especially later on from this point in the days of Nebuchadnezzar and Alexander the Great, some of the great things that they did to lay siege to places like Tyre. But here at this time in history, laying siege to a city, what was involved in that, they would basically guard the roads coming both in and outside of the city. And they would starve the people inside. And that's partly why Jerusalem was such a strategic city for the capital of Israel, because even though they may have been locked in Jerusalem under siege, they had that well that they could still access water within the city. And so now they're at Rabbah. And it's Israel's job to guard the city, to keep them locked inside and basically starve them out until the city is weak, the army is weak, and ready to fall. Sometimes that could take a few weeks. Other times, if they were well-stocked cities, it could take months for a siege against a city. It would not be practical for David to be on the battlefield for that entire time. And in the past, I have heard preaching on this, and I think I have maybe errantly parroted this idea that David was basically being lazy. He should have been out to battle. It was the time that kings were going forth to war, and he's at home at the palace just taking a stroll on the rooftop, just kind of not doing his duty. That's not the case here, okay? It would not have been practical for David to be on the battlefield all that time. He needed to govern and judge the people if this siege would have taken months. It was the job of the commander Joab to lead this campaign, as it was David's at times on behalf of Saul, that Saul would send David out as a military commander. Joab was a capable general, and David had duties in Jerusalem to attend to. And this is where we have to be so careful not to read our thoughts into Scripture based on a certain phrase here or there. Like I said, I've heard it preached and may have parroted in times in the past, but that's not the case. He may not have been at the battle, but it was because he was busy with other tasks governing the people. I want to read you something here from another author. David remains in Jerusalem during all but the final phase of the campaign. When we get to chapter number 13, we're going to see that the city is ready to fall, and Joab calls back to David, and he says, hey, the city's ready to fall. Come here and take the city, lest they give credit to Joab rather than the king of Israel, King David. And that was a normal thing. The generals, the armies would go and prepare the city to fall, and then they'd send word for the king, and he'd come in and have the final battle to be able to take the city. The king's absence from the battlefield at this time should not be understood as dereliction of duty. David has previously remained in Jerusalem when the Ammonites were attacked. Furthermore, at some point in David's military career, David's men had pleaded with him to avoid an active role in military campaigns, all the way ahead in chapter number 21, out of concern for the king's safety and the best interests of the nation. Let's move into verses number 2 and 3. And it came to pass in an eventide that David arose from his bed, and he walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Now, Uriah the Hittite is listed later on in 1st or 2nd Samuel as one of David's mighty men. He was a mighty warrior for David. And this servant comes and informs him who this person was. He looked, he lusted, he continued thinking about her, then asked the servant about her. Hey, who's that pretty girl over there on the roof? Well, my king, that's Uriah's wife. If the fact that David had already many wives up to this point was not enough to stop him from lusting after another woman, the fact that she was another man's wife should have been enough right there. That information should have been a full stop. It should have been a stop before that, because David had a problem lusting after women, having 10 or 11 wives up to this point already. But the fact that she was another man's should have ended it right there, that information that came, but it wasn't. Verse number 4. And David sent messengers and took her. And she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned unto her house. And the woman conceived and sent and told David and said, I am with child. Now, I want you to see the irony in verse number 4. So she was purified from her uncleanness, so David lied with her. In the Torah, back in Leviticus, it was part of the cleanliness laws that while a woman was on her cycle, a man was not to lie with her and have relations with her or be around her. They couldn't even sleep in the same bed, or he would be considered unclean. See the irony in this? And the narrator and the Lord, the Holy Spirit, puts that in here for us to show David's hypocrisy. Well, I made sure that I did not have sex with this woman when she was on her period, so I'm not unclean in doing this, yet he's still violating the Torah by committing adultery and having another man's wife. Like, what in the world? It's hypocrisy. It's irony. Understand, too, that this is more than just one night. This is not just a one-night stand that she goes back the next day and she's like, uh-oh, I just took a test, one of those early tests that they have now, and I'm pregnant, David. No, this is weeks later that she would have realized she's pregnant. It would have been a few weeks. When she did, she let David know immediately. Now there's a big problem. Her husband, Uriah the Hittite, has been off fighting in the battle this whole time. There's no way that they could say that this baby belongs to him. There's no hiding it up to this point. So David begins to go into action trying to save his reputation. Verse number 6. And David sent to Joab saying, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. Now, I think most of you know the story, but imagine reading this for the first time. What's David going to do? This man's wife that he impregnated, he's sending for this man from the battlefield. He's the king. What's he going to do? Is he going to have a heart-to-heart, a man-to-man conversation with Uriah about what happened? Is he going to come clean to him and say, Uriah, man, I messed up. You're one of my mighty men. You've been loyal to me, but, man, I'm sorry. Or is he going to kill Uriah? Just consider that Rabbah, where the battle is and was 40 miles away from Jerusalem. It would have taken 2 to 3 days at least for a messenger to get to Joab and bring Uriah back to Jerusalem. David has had plenty of time to think through this and consider what to do. He had plenty of time and chance to do what was right at this point. But this wasn't a momentary reaction because he felt backed into a corner. Every bit of what David is doing here is thought out and premeditated. A few days go by, and Uriah arrives at the palace. Verse 7. When Uriah was come unto him, David demanded of him how Joab did, and how the people did, and how the war had prospered. Think about this for just a second. You have to wonder if Uriah was a little taken back. Like what was going through his head as he came into the throne room of David and he began asking him these questions. A random soldier, so to speak, from the battlefield is summoned to the king 40 miles away. He comes before the king and wondering, what does the king want? And he asks, hey, how's the battle doing, Uriah? How's Joab doing? Are we winning? What? You think Uriah is suspicious at all? Like, what is this about? You almost picture the servants that are privy to the whole situation eyeing each other as David fumbles around his words with Uriah. They're in the background like, verse number 8. And David said to Uriah, go down to the house and wash thy feet. And Uriah departed out of the king's house, and there followed him a mess of meat from the king, the idea of provisions for him and his wife to celebrate the evening. Verse number 9, but Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and he went down to his house. David decides to give him a night off, to give him a portion of his own meat, maybe hoping he'd go home, he'd enjoy a feast with his wife, and maybe get intimate with her because they've been away and apart for so long, and then they could explain where this baby might have come from. But he didn't do that. He stayed in the king's servants' quarters because Uriah was an honorable man. Verse number 10. And when they had told David, saying, Uriah went not down into his house, and David said to Uriah, camest thou not from thy journey? Why then didst thou not go down unto thine house? And Uriah said unto David, the ark and Israel and Judah abide in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open fields. Shall I then go into mine house and eat and drink and to lie with my wife? As thou livest, and as thy soul livest, I will not do this thing. Uriah is an honorable man. He's not operating for his own comfort. He's operating out of a sense of duty and service to God, to his commander Joab, and his fellow soldiers who are out in battle. And David used to be honorable. Maybe he's gotten a little too comfortable now in the palace. His plan to cover it up has failed, so what's he going to do now? Verse number 12. And David said to Uriah, tarry here today also, and tomorrow I'll let thee depart. So Uriah abode in Jerusalem that day and the morrow. And when David had called him, he did eat and drink before him, and he made him drunk. And at even he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his Lord, but went not down to his house. So So David makes him stay another night. He gets him drunk, hoping that in his inebriated state, he'd be more likely to act in a less honorable way and go home and have sex with his wife, but he doesn't. He stays in the servants' quarters at the palace. So David, verse number 14, it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab, and he sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, Set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. David could not coerce this honorable man to do what was dishonorable, so he sends him back to the battlefield, carrying an order for his own murder. And that's what it is, plain and clear, it's murder. The narrator makes it abundantly clear that at the end of verse 15, that Uriah's death was the clear intent of David's orders, that he may be smitten and die. Joab, I want you to put him in a place where he will die. That's my hope, that's my order, that's my request. Verse number 16. And it came to pass when Joab observed the city that he assigned Uriah unto a place where he knew that valiant men were, men of renown, soldiers that were courageous and powerful. And the men of the city went out and fought with Joab, and there fell some of the people of the servants of David, and Uriah the Hittite died also. Joab goes right along with it. The deed is done. Uriah is dead. David is in the clear. But Joab still needs to explain the blunder in the battle. So more deceit, more conspiracy ensues. Verse number 18. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, When thou hast made an end of telling the matters of the war unto the king, and if so be that the king's wrath arise, and he say unto thee, Wherefore approached ye so nigh unto the city when ye did fight? Know ye not that they would shoot from the wall? Now, this messenger is going back to David to give a report of the battle. David was a great military commander. He was a great strategist. God taught him to do those things. Even in Psalm, he requested that the Lord would teach his hands to fight. And Joab would have known the protocol when laying siege to the city, like we talked about a little bit ago. You don't have unnecessary deaths when you're laying siege to the city. You wait it out until they're starving, until their army is weak. It's stupid, it's wasteful, it's unwise to send a group of soldiers to a place in the city that you know is well fortified and well guarded where you're going to lose people. A commander would get reprimanded from the king for doing something so foolish. So he's explaining to this messenger, if David is angry when this happens, then there's something that you need to say. Verse number 21. If he say, Who smote Abimelech, the son of Jerubasheth? Did not a woman cast a piece of a millstone upon him from the wall that he died in Thebez? Why went ye nigh the wall? Then say thou, Thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. If he starts to get angry because we lost men, I want you to just tell him Uriah is dead. And David's going to understand why innocent men were killed. His plan to have Uriah killed. Verse 22. So the messenger went and came and showed David all that Joab had sent for him. And the messenger said unto David, Surely the men prevailed against us and came out unto us into the field. And we were upon them even unto the entering of the gate, and the shooters shot from off the wall upon thy servants, and some of the king's servants be dead, and thy servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Then David said unto the messenger, now get this just for a second, Thus shalt thou say unto Joab, Let not this thing displease thee, for the sword devoureth one as well as another. Make thy battle more strong against the city, and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. Now, David is appearing as the gracious, encouraging king in these moments. Normally, this would have rendered a rebuke against the commander, and that's why Joab told the messenger, hey, if David gets upset because what we did, this is what you need to tell him. What an absolute joke. He ordered these men to their death for his own selfish purposes, and now he sits on his throne to say, tell Joab that, these things happen in battle. It's no big deal that you unnecessarily sent men to their deaths, innocent men, by acting foolishly in this siege. Oh, it happens. The sword devours one as well as another. Just keep on fighting and be strong and don't be discouraged. Keep fighting and overthrow the city, Joab. He's looking like a merciful, encouraging king. All the while, he's covering up murder. Hypocrisy. It's a mess. It's disgusting, quite frankly. This is David, folks. This ain't Saul. This is David. Verse 26. And when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. And when the mourning was past, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife and bare him a son. Bringing Bathsheba, one says, into the palace after the period of mourning might seem to be an act of kindness, but David is seeking to cover up his tracks. With Uriah dead and gone, many might assume that sometime during his visit to Jerusalem, he'd had relations with his wife and fathered a child, but there are several servants who know better. By marrying Bathsheba, the king can silence all doubt and safely claim that the child is his own. Remember, we are privy to this. The servants are privy to what happened, but the people at the time are not privy to the affair that Bathsheba and David had and the power that David really exercised over her. So now, after she's mourned for her husband that died in battle, which that's what everybody thinks, he died in battle, and it was a foolish mistake by Joab to send the people up there, the soldiers up to that battle. What a merciful king to take her as another one of his wives, to be able to provide for her, and she now gets to be a princess, and David's the good guy in all this. You talk about injustice. Talk about abuse of power. Talk about hypocrisy. Talk about conspiracy. Talk about cover-up. Murder of an innocent and honorable soldier to protect the king's reputation. Reading this, you'd almost think that it belonged in 1 Samuel. You think it belonged in an event in the reign of Saul, but it's not. It's David, God's chosen king, the one after his own heart, the one he made an unconditional covenant with to establish his dynasty and his throne forever. Read with me the last 10 words of verse 27. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. That phrase rings out loud over the rest of the narrative in this chapter and the next. David may have looked like a hero, a merciful and gracious and encouraging king that's taken on this woman, this charity case, so to speak, and made her a princess, made her a queen. He's been encouraging to his military leaders when they've committed blunders in the battlefield. What a great guy. But God saw what really happened. And though the nation may have been pleased with David's actions and the way that he handled this on the surface, them not knowing what happened, God is not pleased. Let's back up to the big idea here, the big picture. Power, success, and affluence have great potential to corrupt. When they do, God is not pleased. And that is the overarching message of the Holy Spirit moving on the writer of 2 Samuel. This thing did not please the Lord. It displeased him. When we sin, when we allow things to go further than they ever should have, it displeases the Lord. This was a clear abuse of power on David's part. It was a clear his affluence there in the palace, thinking that he just deserved every single thing that he set his eyes on and desired and lusted. Why shouldn't he have it? He's the king after all. Why shouldn't he have it? He ran from Saul in the wilderness. He had a lot of hard years in the early life before king, running from Saul. He had 7 hard years when the nation would not unite under him. And his military leaders, his own nephews, Joab and Abishai, they committed atrocities like killing Abner. And man, he did all these battles and wars for the Lord. And why shouldn't he have what he wants? He's given so much, after all. We don't know David's exact thinking, but we know that he sent servants in abuse of his power. He ordered people to take her when he should have just left it alone. Then he abused his military power, ordering and sending the order with the man he's going to have killed, carrying his own death order to the battlefield. It's an absolute abuse of power. Power, affluence, success, it has great potential to corrupt. And we have to realize that when that happens, God is not pleased. What's the big picture in the larger narrative? Got a couple points here to consider. Number one, in the narrative of Samuel, as stated, it starts a section of the narrative where David deals with a lot of problems that were, in a sense, consequences of unwise and sinful decisions. Eventually, there's going to be conflict between his various step-siblings and half-siblings raping other half-siblings, and one going to David, and David not taking care of it in the way that he saw fit, and eventually Absalom gets bitter against David and takes the kingdom from David for a couple years, runs him out of Jerusalem. And there are consequences that were a result of some of his unwise, sinful decisions, beginning with taking many wives to himself. Number two, the narrative answers some of the questions that may have come to mind when hearing reports of David's many wives that we've heard multiple times. His wandering eye and lustful heart led to a deeper sin and greater consequences, as it always does. It didn't start that night. David didn't fall with Bathsheba because he wasn't at battle. David fell with Bathsheba because he didn't put his lustful heart in check years before that, taking to himself many wives. Now it went to a worse place where he commits adultery with another man's wife and then has that man put to death. Number three, it sets the stage for the beauty of God's covenantal grace to be displayed in allowing David to continue as king and even establish a son of this woman, Bathsheba, as the next king and wisest man on earth. Talk about the grace of God. I mean, there's grace out of this mess. Now, it's not this son that Bathsheba conceived here in chapter 11. That son's going to die, and David will grieve, and that will be a consequence, or that child, that baby rather. But eventually she will give birth to Solomon, who becomes the next king of Israel, the wisest man in all of the world, and has great success in Jerusalem. And this sets the stage for the beauty of God's covenantal grace in allowing David to continue. Remember, I mean, we talked about this back in 1 Samuel. Saul, he just didn't kill Agag. And we say just because in a human fleshly type of perspective. He didn't kill King Agag, and he kept alive some sheep and some cows. And God said, I'm taking the kingdom from you and giving it to another. You're not going to have a house or a dynasty anymore. And now David, what David does in relation to that, both are disobedience to God's commands. And no matter where we disobey God's command, it's a bad thing. But from a human perspective, what David did here was a whole lot worse than what Saul did when God rejected his house from continuing. And this is a display, it's a picture of God's grace. God didn't establish a covenant with David because he was such a great man. God established a covenant with David knowing that this was going to happen because God knows the end from the beginning to show his grace in that. Number four, this and the problems that come also show us that God's people are still in need of a greater king. All human leadership is capable of failing. And yes, we thought David was that king, the king after God's own heart, but they still need a better king. And who is that king? Jesus. And we still wait for that king. the perfect king, the one who will reign in absolute righteousness. In the increase of his government and his reign, there will be no end. And that leads us to how can we consider Jesus? Really, here's an opposite of David. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 and 16. We have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. David was tempted and did sin. Jesus was tempted and never sinned. Let us therefore come boldly into the throne of grace that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Jesus is the one that we go to because he is the perfect one. Even though the Hall of Faith, Hebrews chapter 11, all the great men that did and women that did amazing things by faith in the Old Testament, he gets to the end of chapter 11 and says, we have been given and provided something far better, and that's Jesus. And a greater promise. So we look to Jesus. Even as we consider their faith, we keep our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, never looking solely to the people in the Old Testament, the men and women who are fallible. Here's some takeaways, a couple practical takeaways. Number one, even the best are capable of falling, so be on guard. James chapter 1, verse 14 and 15 says, every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. And when lust hath conceived, it brings forth sin, and when sin is finished, it brings forth death. Proverbs says that the prudent man foresees the evil, and he hides himself from it, but the simple pass on and are punished. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, if thy right hand offends you, if it causes you to sin, cut it off. If thy right eye offends you, it causes you to sin, pluck it out. Be on guard. You're no better than David. I'm no better than David. Each of us are capable of falling, even the best. So be on guard. Number two, don't place your faith in people because people are fallible. Just recognize that. Always, always, always have your eyes on Jesus. There's so many people that say, well, yeah, I used to be a Christian, but man, then this person, they let me down, or this person in the church was a hypocrite, or this leader. We don't excuse those types of things. It's sin and it's wrong, but here's the thing. If people cause you to walk away from Jesus, your focus was on the wrong thing in the first place. People are fallible. People will let you down. Jesus never will, amen? He's perfect. Keep your eyes on Him. Number two, unrepentant and unconfessed sin will often, we could even probably put always, lead to more sin. David should have just got it right. But he didn't. He should have come clean. Uriah, you've been a soldier for me. You've been loyal. And I messed up. When you were on the battlefield, I took your wife. Right then and there it should have ended. But it didn't. So worried about his own reputation that it led him to deeper and worse sin. Murdering Uriah, covering it up. Not just Uriah, other men died in that battle, other innocent soldiers. Unconfessed and unrepentant sin will often lead to more. Just get it right. Just confess it. Just repent. And number three, finally, our sin displeases the Lord. And that may be the greatest thing for us to remember. Christianity, why we're here tonight, is not because we have a set of rules that we follow. It's because we have been reconciled to God of heaven and earth. It's because we have a relationship with a holy God who loves us and desired that relationship with us. And anything that we do, we love Him because He first loved us. And if we love Him, we keep His commandments. And His commandments are not grievous. But it begins with that relationship, desiring to please Him because of His grace toward me. And when we sin, it displeases the Lord. It grieves the Holy Spirit of God. It hurts the one that we love so much because He loved us first. What David did here, he may have saved face in the kingdom, but God was not pleased. You may have a good reputation with others, but when God looks down, is He pleased or is He grieved? because that's what matters. That's really, really what matters in the end. Galatians 1:10, what did Paul say? For do I now persuade men or God, or I seek to please men? If I yet please men, I should not be the servant of Christ. And I hope each and every one of us here tonight would say, I'm a servant of Christ, and I desire to please Him. Our sin displeases the Lord.